Working at the Gilded Cage wasn't all that bad. Behind the high-class suits and the low-lit atmosphere, it was more or less just like any other high-end bar I'd worked in. I'd heard a lot of people call it old money's speakeasy, although I don't really think that's the best comparison. They paid us well and they treated us well, so there wasn't much else I could realistically ask for. Honestly, if it wasn't for the private backroom and their weird set of rules, I'd have said there was nothing even remotely special about the Gilded Cage. But there's the rub, right? The private room and the rules surrounding it. On my first day, the owner himself sat me down to go over them. He made it pretty clear that they took these things seriously. They're mostly there for both guidance and as a precaution, he said. Corporate really pushes us to make sure they're enforced. So just try to keep them in mind when you're on shift. I know that some of them may seem a little absurd, but I promise ye, they're there for a reason. I told him that I understood and assured him I'd do everything I could to follow them, and I meant it, even if I wasn't entirely sure why they needed to exist in the first place. So what are the rules for working at the Gilded Cage? I'll tell you. Lord knows I've read them over so many times that I know them by heart. They were posted in the kitchen, behind the bar, and by the employee lockers, so it was hard to go anywhere without being reminded of them. If a guest presents a silver key, it must be taken to the bar and authenticated with a drop of blood. If the key is approved, lead them to the back room, which can be accessed through a hidden door at the back of the restaurant. 2. If the key is not approved, notify the management immediately, but do not notify the guest and do not engage in conversation with them. No new guests may be seated until the unapproved guest has been dealt with. Please see evacuation procedures for instructions in the event of an escalation. 4. Please review the evacuation procedures regularly. The safety of our staff and guests is our top priority. Be familiar with the emergency exits and safe zones. Only employees with a platinum PIN ID badge are to be allowed access to the back room. 6. Wait staff are not to follow guests into the back room, even if invited. If a guest invites a staff member into the back room, they're to refuse and report the incident to management. 7. Neither the back room nor the policies surrounding it are to be discussed with outside parties. Violation of this rule will result in termination. 8. While on shift, you will be given a name to use. The name you are given must be used at all times. While inside the restaurant, do not tell customers your real name, under any circumstances. 9. For your safety, do not make direct eye contact with guests, especially if they have presented you with a silver key. 10. If any guest requests to meet up with you outside of work or asks for your real name, you are to decline. If the guest persists, call management. If you suspect a guest has followed you outside of work, inform the management ASAP. They will decide whether the police need to be contacted, or if the problem should be dealt with via another avenue. Do not contact the police yourself. Like I said, the rules were weird. No eye contact, using fake names, being encouraged to report incidents to the management instead of contacting the police. It all seemed a little suspicious. Then there was the whole set of rules regarding the back room. They weren't joking about taking them seriously either. I'd seen the head bartender, Sebastian, tear some guys a new one for flirting with customers or using their real names in the restaurant. I'd even seen him fire people on the spot. One guy was let go when he posted a picture of the rules online, and one of the waiters who'd started around the same time I had lost his job after trying to sneak into the back room. Sebastian wasn't someone I'd necessarily describe as strict. If anything, he was pretty easygoing most of the time, but when it came to the rules, there was no room for debate with either him or the management. Speaking of the back room, I didn't really know what went on down there, and neither did most of the other employees, but we had our suspicions, mainly that there was something illegal going on. Although speculation ranged from a high-stakes gambling ring to a black market for stolen art, timer theories suggested it was just a meeting place for some shady characters, or a harmless speakeasy that marketed itself by being exclusive. Either way, most of us had no idea what was down there, and the few who did never talked about it. Despite the secrecy, I personally figured that whatever was happening wasn't anything illegal. Every Gilded Cage had one, and they couldn't all be criminal dens. Plus, most of the handful of staff members who did have access to the back room were sommeliers, so that at least implied that there was an actual wine cellar down there. Either way, I never questioned any of it that much. The regular bar work paid pretty well, and the police had never showed up to investigate, so there was at least an implication that whatever was going on down there was fully above board. I was curious about the back room, sure, but I didn't think about it that much, and it rarely affected my day-to-day work. A few times a day, a customer would come in with a silver key, and I'd authenticate it. When it came back approved, and they always did, I'd show them to the door. They'd swipe their key and go in. Usually they'd come back up in an hour or so, although if they were too drunk or too rowdy, the bouncer downstairs would turn them away. I'd never actually seen the downstairs bouncer, but I was told that we had one. The silver key customers never really stood out to me in any meaningful way. They just seemed like regular people going about their business. Sometimes they'd come in groups, sometimes they'd come alone, sometimes they'd eat before showing their key to go inside, and sometimes they'd eat after. There were some faces I learned to recognize as regular silver key customers, and during the brief conversations I had with some of them as they got a drink at the bar, they seemed not only pretty nice, but also normal. They weren't shady. They never acted like they were hiding anything, or like what went on in the back room was some big secret. They just seemed normal, and I think that's a big part of why I didn't question what was going on in the back room. There truly didn't seem to be anything that off about it. The mystery didn't seem important, or even like much of a mystery. It was weird. But the entire freaking restaurant was weird. They paid well. Nothing seemed shady. I didn't question it, and everything was fine. And then Mr. Thorne showed up. Mr. Thorne looked to be in his mid-70s. He had thinning gray hair, a finely tailored suit, and a sort of weathered look to him, although his physique was damn near godlike. I could see his arms under his jacket, and it was pretty clear that he hadn't missed a lot of days at the gym. He wasn't a regular. I'd never actually seen him in there before, which is part of why I didn't pay that much attention to him at first. When he came in, he sat at a booth in my co-workers section and ordered a glass of whiskey, a high-end whiskey from the looks of it. My co-worker came in to check on him every so often, although Mr. Thorne mostly seemed content to sip at his drink and check his phone. At one point, I did notice him reach out to grab her arm, and saw that she paused to look at him, although I didn't think much of it. If she'd had a problem with him, she would have told me. I'm not the toughest guy in the world, but I'm big and I've got a deep voice, which makes it easy for me to come off as intimidating, even if I've thrown a punch in my life. As a result, most of the girls usually came to me whenever they had a problem customer, and she was no exception. I wouldn't exactly have called us friends, but we got along all right, and I'd always liked her just fine. She was in her mid-20s, with long blonde hair that she usually wore in a tight bun. She was a good-looking woman, and I'd had to step in a few times before, when some drunk customer had confused customer service with flirting and gotten upset when she'd politely declined their advances. I noticed she always wore a silver locket around her neck, engraved with a single unblinking eye. It was an odd detail, but I hadn't thought much of it. Since my co-worker hadn't said anything to me about Mr. Thorne touching her arm, I was willing to completely forget it until she came to me with a silver key. "This is from the gentleman at 3, she said. I nodded and took the key from her before taking it over to the computer at the far side of the bar. The key had a picture of the owner, as well as his name, Mr. Thorne, although any information aside from that was scarce. No address, no date of birth. There wasn't even any logo denoting who the key belonged to. Just a silver raven in the upper right-hand corner. This was clearly intended to be something else. 4 silver keys looked like this, so Mr. Thorne's wasn't anything special. I used the small lancet we kept by the terminal to draw a single drop of my blood on the key and waited for the approved notification to pop up, as it always did. Instead, a new notification appeared. "Declined. Please contact management." My brow furrowed, and I looked over toward Mr. Thorne. He was staring at the bar, and I made a point not to make direct eye contact as I swiped the key a second time. "Declined. Please contact management." I set the silver key aside and reached into my pocket to text the boss. He wasn't on site at the moment, but I knew he could be in about 20 minutes. My coworker stood by the bar, waiting on me. "Everything okay, Sam?" she asked. "It's declined," I replied, looking up at her. "Declined?" she repeated. "That can't be right." He said, "It's good." "Well, system says otherwise," I said with a shrug. Her eyes settled on my phone, and for a moment I thought I saw something in her expression. Relief. Maybe. I was about to ask her if she was okay when I noticed that Mr. Thorne had gotten up and was coming toward us. "Everything all right here?" he asked. "Of course," I lied, putting on a fake smile for him. "The back room is just at capacity right now. I'm checking with the host to see if we can fit you in." "At capacity, huh?" Mr. Thorne asked. He glanced at my coworker, but didn't say anything. "I'm sure you can make room for one more, can't you?" "Of course, sir. We're just making sure we can. If you'd like to have a seat, I could send you another drink on the house." I figured that would be enough to get him to back off, but Mr. Thorne didn't seem interested. "It can't take this long to get an answer from the host, can it?" he asked. "Sorry, sir. They're pretty busy back there," I said. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my coworker rounding the bar. That was odd. She didn't usually go back here with me. "Really? Never seen them that busy," Mr. Thorne said. He leaned up against the bar and smiled at me. That smile was unsettling. His teeth almost seemed like they were sharpened to a point, although even that description didn't quite suit them. That smile looked like something you'd see on a deep-sea fish. "Why don't you just send me back?" he asked. "I won't cause a fuss, I promise." "I'm sorry, sir." My breath caught in my throat a little. I looked around, hoping that someone else on the waitstaff would notice something was wrong, but they were all busy. The supervisor on shift, Sebastian, was on the other side of the restaurant. The management was out. I felt my coworker coming up beside me and looked over at her. Her expression was placid and calm, unsettlingly so. "You're sorry?" Mr. Thorne repeated, his tone almost mocking. "Come on, kiddo. At least look me in the eye when you talk to me." He leaned in closer, but I looked past him, right up until I felt my coworker beside me. I looked over at her in the instant before she grabbed me, jerking my head to the side, trying to make me look directly at Mr. Thorne. I was strong enough to fight her off, but not strong enough to fight off both of them. My coworker pushed me, and I stumbled for a moment. Mr. Thorne reached over the bar to grab me, and for just a moment, my eyes met with his.
"Relax." He spoke that word and I felt calm. I felt drunk, almost. "Look at me." My coworker helped me regain my balance, and I finally looked Mr. Thorne in the eye. I knew I wasn't supposed to. I knew I shouldn't. I didn't want to. But I did it anyways. My body just moved. obeying his command, and my eyes locked with his. I could feel something in my mind, something moving, shifting, pushing me aside. "Why don't we all go down to the back room?" Mr. Thorne asked. "Oh, and bring a wine key. We may need it." The answer I wanted to give was no, but those aren't the words that came out of my mouth. "Yes, right this way, sir," I said. I handed him back his silver key.
As I left the bar, I paused to grab both a wine key and a platinum pin from under the counter. The bar manager had left it there, in case nobody else was available to open the door to the back room. I'd had to use it a few times before, although I'd never gone past the door. Miss Thorne and my co-worker both followed me as I left the bar, and from the corner of my eye, I could see a fear in my co-worker's eyes that I now understood all too well. She was in the same state that I was, aware, thinking, but unable to do anything. I'd always thought that the rule about not looking customers in the eye was just part of the gimmick. It was dumb, but they paid me to follow it. So I followed it. Only now did I begin to understand why it existed. Although if this was why they'd implemented the rule, what was waiting for us in the back room?
I approached the door to the back room and swiped the key at the end of the pin before quietly opening the door. I looked over at Mr. Thorne, holding the door open for him as an invitation. "You are too kind," he said. "Let's go inside and see if we can't find ourselves a bottle." Inside? We weren't supposed to go inside. We sure as hell weren't supposed to follow a customer in there, but my co-worker and I both obeyed silently, following Mr. Thorne down the darkened hallway into the private room of the Gilded Cage. I could feel my heart racing as panic set in. I don't think I'd ever been so scared in my life. Here I was, completely out of my own control, and being led into darkness. Beside me, I could hear my co-worker's shallow trembling breaths. If I was in full control of myself, I would have reached out to offer her a hand, but I wasn't in control. We reached the end of the hall and found ourselves in a small white lobby with a bar and some small tables with plush chairs. The sommelier behind the bar at the time was busy with some other guests and didn't seem to notice us. Mr. Thorne didn't even look at the bar. He just led us toward a long white hallway lined with black doors. At the end of the hall was another set of stairs, presumably leading to some other entrance, although I'd never heard anything about a second entrance to the back room before. Beside the entrance to the hall, I noticed a large dark statue of a griffin with the body of a man. If I wasn't under Mr. Thorne's spell, I might have actually admired it. It was taller than I was, and both grotesque and beautiful at the same time. It was incredibly well designed. It almost looked lifelike. The short platinum blonde hair on her head looked real, and I could have sworn that her two shiny black eyes were watching us as we passed. Mr. Thorne stared at the statue and smiled calmly. He looked around before walking down the hallway, glancing at the doors we passed. Each one had a small window in it, allowing us to see inside. Looking through those windows as we passed, I recognized a few people who I'd seen going into the back room earlier. Most of them were regulars, although the things they were doing in there, each of them seemed to be sitting on a chaise with someone else. Sometimes a man, sometimes a woman. In almost all cases they were bleeding, usually from the arm or the shoulder, and I could have sworn that our regulars were drinking their blood. I only caught a quick glimpse of what was going on. I didn't see enough to know for sure, but it was hard to mistake those brief glimpses I got as I passed by the rooms as anything else. What the hell was this place? Because this wasn't like any bar I'd ever seen before. Mr. Thorne paused in front of an empty room and gestured for my co-worker and I to go inside. She went in first, opening the door and staring at the black leather chaise before her. I could see panic in her eyes. She'd seen what I'd seen through the doors in the hall, and odds are she'd noticed Mr. Thorne's nightmare teeth as well. I think she already knew what was coming. "You in the corner," Mr. Thorne said. "But you," He turned my coworker around and gripped her shoulder with disturbing strength, her arm twisting as his grip bruised her skin through the fabric. "On the chaise," he said, and my coworker obediently turned to sit down on it. Miss Thorne approached her, pausing to sniff her hair as he sat down beside her. He tilted her head, admiring her unbroken skin for a moment. I could feel a rage bubbling up in my chest. I wanted to hurt this man. My coworker was my friend, my colleague, and seeing her so afraid, knowing that he was going to do something horrible to her, it made my blood boil. But I could only just stand there, wishing I could help her, wishing I could pull him off of her. I had no illusions that I could actually win against him, but if I could just stop him, if I could just keep him busy while she called for help. "Very fresh," Mr. Thorne crooned. "I'm going to enjoy this." He opened his mouth, revealing his full set of teeth. I wanted to scream in the moment before he sank them into my coworker's shoulder. She whimpered in pain as blood trickled down from her wound, and Mr. Thorne pressed his face to her shoulder, and a low, contented hum filled the silence. I could only watch in horror. That was when the door flew open. I was almost relieved to see Sebastian storm into the room, looking angrier than I'd ever seen him. "That's enough," he snarled, and Mr. Thorne looked up at him, a quiet fury in his eyes that didn't quite match his own. He pushed my coworker aside before standing up. His teeth were bared, and I noticed Sebastian's lips curling back, revealing an almost identical set of jagged fangs. "Whatever happened to privacy?" Mr. Thorne asked. "Your membership was revoked," Sebastian replied coldly. "You don't belong here." "Isn't an old man entitled to a meal?" he asked. "Let me eat in peace. I'm not even taking from your blood stock, and odds are the girl will live." "That's not the goddamn point, and you know it," Sebastian hissed. "Let me eat in peace," Mr. Thorne said again, taking a step toward him. His eyes shifted over toward me. "We wouldn't want to make a mess of this situation, would we? That bartender of yours looks awfully upset. Be a shame if he got hurt during this whole mess, wouldn't it?" "Sam, are you all right, him?" Sebastian asked. As I hurled the wine key aside, my hands were shaking, but otherwise I was fine. I nodded. He took a look at the cut on my neck before finally helping me up and going to attend to my coworker's wound. After Mr. Thorne was gone, my coworker and I had a very, very long conversation with Sebastian about exactly what the hell had just happened, a conversation that I admittedly still haven't fully processed. It feels a little dismissive to say we talked it out and everything turned out fine, but in a lot of ways, that's exactly what happened. My coworker and I were both paid a considerable bonus for our troubles, and she ended up quitting a couple of weeks later. I don't blame her for that. We haven't stayed in touch, but I think about her sometimes, and I hope she's doing okay. As for me, I got my own platinum pin. I already know what's down in the back room, so I might as well do some work down there too. I'm not complaining. The tips down there are fantastic. You know, of all the things that people suggested that the back room might be, I never would have considered the possibility that it was a bar where gargoyles and other creatures could feed off of willing prey. Although in hindsight that does explain a lot, once you realize that the rules exist to protect the staff from any bad actors who might visit the restaurant looking for blood. They actually do make a lot more sense. Of course, only those in good standing with the organization that runs the Gilded Cage get to feed there, hence the need for the silver keys. Apparently, Mr. Thorne had fallen out of the organization's good graces. I can't for the life of me imagine why. I'm still not sure what he hoped to gain by showing up here and causing a scene like that. Maybe he was just that desperate. Maybe he thought he could stick it to the powers that be. Maybe this was all just an elaborate suicide attempt. Who's to say? Either way, the management has taken steps to ensure that this kind of mess never happens again.
There have been some adjustments to the rules. Now, if we have a problem guest, instead of just messaging them, we also message Sebastian and we message Brenda downstairs. Brenda's the name of the giant nightmare griffin in the basement. Turns out that she's the bouncer. And if a problem guest makes it down the stairs, she's been given more freedom to make an example out of them.